Welcome back to RealFear Files. Tonight, we're stepping into something that doesn't simply lurk in the dark. It watches, learns, and practices being human when no one is paying attention. In this episode, you'll hear 9 disturbing first-hand encounters from people who claim they crossed paths with something that only resembled a person from afar. Its movements were close enough to fool you. Its voice almost carried the right emotion, and its smile always came just a fraction too late. These accounts aren't stories made for entertainment. They're assembled from late-night messages, voice recordings, and personal testimonies sent by individuals who still question what they survived. Names have been altered, locations obscured, and certain details withheld to protect those who are still afraid of being recognized. If this is your first time here, subscribe to RealFear Files for daily true horror rooted in real encounters. Enable notifications, because some experiences don't stay buried, and neither does the fear. My name isn't Thomas anymore. Call me Evan. And for most of my life, I laughed at the kind of stories truckers tell when the highway stretches too long and sleep starts messing with their heads. Tales about shapes in the trees, voices that don't belong. I filed all of it under boredom and bad coffee. I wasn't a believer. Never was. I checked weather apps obsessively, locked my doors twice, planned everything. Ghost stories were for people who needed excuses. That mindset lasted right up until one winter job in western Montana, when I heard my own voice drift out of the woods and call for me, like it knew exactly how I sounded when I was irritated. Not a recording, not a dream, just my voice, hanging in the frozen air about 50 yards from my trailer. The job had looked clean on paper. I was 36, freshly divorced, buried in debt after a small business imploded and dragged my pride down with it. A buddy of a buddy mentioned a security gig guarding a logging site. Solo overnight shifts, heated trailer, cameras, floodlights. 12-hour nights in the off-season, but the pay was solid. It sounded boring. At that point, boring felt safe. The site sat at the end of a narrow, icy road that twisted deep into forest. By the time you hit the clearing, trees boxed you in tight. Spruce and fir stacked so thick they felt like a wall once the sun dropped. My first night, the day supervisor walked me around. Big guy, broad shoulders, beard like steel wool. His name was Cal. He pointed out the generators, fuel tanks, camera feeds, radio channels. Basic stuff. When we got back to the trailer, he paused with his hand on the door and gave me a look that didn't match the casual walkthrough. "If you hear whistling from the trees," he said, "don't go looking. Just turn the radio up." I laughed, figured it was a hazing thing. He didn't smile. "Locals call them whistlers," he added. "Something out there that copies people. Probably coyotes. Still, after midnight, stay inside. You're not paid enough to chase sounds." Night 2 brought serious cold, below zero. The kind that makes everything outside glitter and crack like glass. Floodlights carved the yard into harsh white shapes. My routine locked in fast. Coffee. One quick walk while there was still a smear of sunset left. Fuel checks. Then back inside to watch the monitors and kill time until my phone lost signal. The silence out there wasn't normal. No distant roads, no planes, no background hum of civilization. Just wind in branches and the occasional pop of ice settling. Around 1 in the morning, I caught movement on camera 3, southeast corner of the yard. Something low and fast slipped between stacked logs. My gut tightened, but my brain jumped in quick. Deer, elk, shadows doing dumb things in grainy night vision. I told myself that, believed it just enough to steady my hands. An hour later, the radio spoke, in my voice. Base, this is Site 1. Checking in. All quiet here. Same tone, same clipped way I say quiet. Word for word. Except I hadn't touched the mic. It was sitting on the desk. No lights, no transmission. I stared at it, waiting for someone to laugh. Nothing. Just static. Then silence. I keyed up, my voice pitched higher than I liked. Dispatch, Site 1. Did you just get a check-in from me? The dispatcher came back, bored and confused. Negative, Site 1. Last transmission was at 2340. You good up there? I said yes, because what else do you say? I set the radio down slow and told myself it was interference. Old signal bounce. The explanation sucked, but I clung to it. Fourth night, the footsteps showed up. It was after 2. Cold so deep the world outside looked dead. I was stretching, pacing between the desk and sink when snow crunched outside the trailer. Crunch. Step. Crunch. It matched me, half a beat behind. Circling. I froze. So did the sound. I took one careful step toward the door. Outside, it mirrored me. Exact rhythm. The trailer suddenly felt thin, like tinfoil and screws between me and whatever was out there. I slapped the lights off and stood in the glow of the monitors. Through the narrow window, I could see a slice of yard and the black wall of trees beyond. Nothing moved. Cameras showed empty snow and silent equipment. But when I shifted my weight, the crunch answered again. Right under the window, too close. Eventually it drifted away. Slow, unhurried. Back toward the tree line. I watched the feeds like they were the last thing keeping me sane. Nothing crossed into view. By the end of the week, I was lying to myself, saying I was just tired. Isolation messing with my head. I left the radio on constantly for background noise. Stretched simple tasks into rituals. Anything to keep my thoughts busy. Because free minds notice things. The night it said my name, all of that collapsed. Just after 3, I was rereading the same page of a paperback when I heard it through the wall. Evan. Normal tone. Not loud, not soft. Like someone trying to get my attention. Then again, closer. Evan, come look at this. That second line almost made me puke. Same cadence I use when calling someone over. Casual, slightly amused. And I was alone. Every rational excuse tried to stand up and failed. My skin didn't care. My body knew. I walked to the window and lifted the blind just enough to peek. The yard lay under hard white light. At the edge of it, where snow met trees, something stood. From a distance, it looked like a man. Tall, thin, facing the trailer. The longer I stared, the more wrong it felt. Legs too long, arms hanging low, head tilted like it didn't quite fit. Then my voice floated out again. Evan! Its mouth didn't move. The sound came from that direction anyway, like the woods themselves were talking. Come look at this. I didn't breathe, didn't blink. On the monitor beside me, camera 3 flickered as the wind tugged the cable. For half a second, the image smeared. When it cleared, the shape didn't match what I'd been staring at through the glass. The head sat higher now. The shoulders were narrower. The whole outline looked stretched, like it was testing a new size and hadn't settled yet. That was the moment I knew going outside would be the last bad decision I ever made. I backed away from the window, slow and careful, like sudden movement might invite it closer. My hand searched for the radio without my eyes leaving the dark reflection in the glass. My fingers slipped, Sweat made the plastic slick. When I finally keyed the mic, my voice came out thin and shaky. I called dispatch. Then I called Cal. Then anyone whose name I could remember. I didn't say what I saw. I just said there was someone on site who wouldn't respond, and I needed a supervisor now. While I waited, it experimented. First, it laughed. My laugh, but wrong. Too delayed. Like it had to think about where the sound went. I didn't recognize it until a memory surfaced of an old phone recording my ex once played to tease me. Then it tried my father's voice. Used my childhood nickname. The same disappointed tone he'd used when I screwed something up. Then it went lower. My younger brother. I hadn't heard that voice in 12 years. Not since the accident. That one almost dropped me. My knees buckled, and I had to grab the desk to stay upright. It never nailed them perfectly. There was always something off. A pause too long. A breath where there shouldn't be one. But it was close enough that some animal part of my brain leaned toward the sound before the rest of me screamed no. Time stopped behaving right. Everything became noise and static and waiting. At some point, headlights cut through the trees down the road. The radio crackled with Cal's irritated voice, saying he was 5 minutes out. I risked another look through the blind. The tree line was empty. No tracks marked the snow between the trailer and the woods. The ground looked untouched, like nothing had ever stood there at all. Cal showed up stomping inside, beard crusted with frost. I almost broke right there, almost told him everything. Instead, I said there'd been someone messing around near the stacks. Trespassers, maybe. He did a lazy sweep of the yard with his flashlight. Found nothing. Came back, shaking his head. Probably coyotes, he said. Sound does weird stuff up here at night. I nodded and let him believe it. I needed him to stay, and he wouldn't have if he thought I was losing it. He sat with me for an hour, drank my coffee, talked about work schedules and his kids' hockey team. Normal life stuff. It felt like standing in a warm doorway while a blizzard screamed outside. When he finally left, dawn was bruising the sky. I lasted 3 more nights. On the last one, camera 3 caught it again. Same spot, edge of the light. It didn't move, didn't sway, just stood there. I zoomed in. The image fell apart into pixels, but I could make out 2 dark hollows where eyes should have been, and the suggestion of a mouth that was way too wide. It stayed like that for 30 straight minutes. The camera logged it. When sunrise came, I stepped outside to check the snow. Still untouched. I quit the next day. Officially, I blamed the hours. Said my back couldn't handle it. Unofficially, I knew the truth. If I stayed, one night curiosity or exhaustion would win, and I'd step into those floodlights when it called. Now, I can't stand recordings of my own voice. Voicemails, old videos, anything that sounds like me coming from a speaker makes my skin crawl. I have this sick fear that one night my phone will ring, and when I answer, I'll hear myself on the other end, slightly delayed, asking how I've been. People like to think monsters are obvious, all teeth and claws and glowing eyes. What I saw didn't charge or scream or try to break in. It stood still and practiced. Practiced my voice, my laugh, my family, like it was learning how to wear me. And the thought that rots my brain is simple and quiet and never leaves. If it learned me that well in just a handful of nights, who is it wearing now? My name isn't Isabella anymore. Call me Mara. And I used to think a cursed apartment was just realtor code for black mold, busted pipes, and neighbors who don't sleep. I moved to the city for grad school with a mountain of loans and zero backup plan. When you're broke and exhausted, you don't interrogate miracles. You sign the lease. You ignore the whispers. You convince yourself that the tight feeling in your chest is just nerves adjusting to a new place. That worked right up until I heard my own footsteps answering me from the empty apartment above mine. Perfect timing. Same rhythm. Same pauses. And no one was supposed to live there. The building sat on the edge of downtown. An old brick walk-up that probably wore the word luxury sometime around the 1950s, before time chewed it up and spat it out. 4 stories. Narrow stairs. Everything smelled faintly like dust and old heat. Unit 3B was a miracle on paper. 1 bedroom. Tiny kitchen. Windows that looked into a skinny alley and the tired backs of other buildings just like it. The landlord was a man in his 60s, with nicotine-stained fingers and a smile that never reached his eyes. He slid the lease across a desk, drowning in paperwork, and barely glanced at my ID. When I asked why the rent was so low, he shrugged. "Last tenant left fast," he said. "Been empty a while. You students are always hunting deals." When I hauled my boxes up the stairs that first afternoon, I noticed the door across the hall. 4B, directly above mine in the building's numbering. The metal plaque hung crooked. The peephole was covered from the inside with a strip of old yellow tape. The hallway light above it flickered in a way the others didn't. It should have meant nothing. Just another vacant unit. But every time I passed it, I felt watched. Like eyes pressed against that taped-over glass, staring without blinking. The other tenants were polite in that distant city way. A woman from the 2nd floor warned me the boiler went feral around 3 in the morning. A guy from the 4th told me the mailroom door jammed when it rained. Normal stuff. But whenever 4B came up, people hesitated. Conversations stalled. Like someone hit pause. 3 nights after I moved in, I found out why. It was Thursday. I was up late wrestling a brutal research article, my brain fried from citations and jargon. Around midnight, I shoved my chair back and decided I deserved tea for surviving the day. The apartment was dead quiet except for the fridge humming. I walked from the living room to the kitchen, bare feet on warped hardwood. I counted the squeaks without thinking. Above me, footsteps started. They crossed from right to left, slow and steady. Each creak landed exactly when mine did. I stopped. They stopped. I took 2 steps toward the sink. 2 steps answered from above. I told myself someone must have moved in quietly. Old buildings carried sound. But something about the precision made my stomach roll. It didn't feel like walking. It felt like listening. Like something was waiting to hear what I'd do next. When I went back to my desk, a chair scraped above me. Wood on wood. Same timing. The next morning, I asked the woman from the 2nd floor if someone had taken 4B. She paused for a beat too long, then shook her head. "No, still empty," she said. "Has been since he left." She didn't explain who he was. I didn't ask. But I noticed she glanced up at the ceiling twice while measuring detergent, like she was checking who might be listening. The building had a story. They always do. It came in pieces, half sentences, lowered voices. The guy in 4B had disappeared a year before I arrived. Rent kept auto-paying, no family listed, no one to report him missing. Neighbors noticed the smell first. Then the TV stuck on the same public access channel. Footsteps at weird hours. When the landlord finally showed up with a cop, the unit was empty. No furniture. No clothes. Just a mattress on the floor. And a closet full of labeled boxes. Inside each one were Polaroids. Photos of people standing at windows, taken from outside, at night. The paperwork called it a voluntary disappearance. The tenants used another name when they thought no one new was listening. The Echo Man, an older resident whispered to me weeks later. He used to stand in the hallway and repeat whatever you said. Perfectly. Freaked people out. Then one day he stopped coming out. Some folks think he left. Others think something else stayed. I laughed because laughing is cheaper than moving. That didn't help at 1 a.m. when my own voice spoke from the other side of my door. It started with my name. I was half asleep, floating in that fog between dreams and waking. Pipes ticked. Traffic sighed in the distance. Someone's TV murmured through a wall. Mara. Clear. Close. I shot upright, heart slamming. The room was empty. The sound hadn't come from inside. It came from the hallway. I sat there, listening hard. Silence stretched. Then, Mara. The second time scraped my nerves raw. It was my voice, my tone, the little lift at the end when I ask for something, like someone had studied me closely. I stepped into the entryway, hands shaking, and pressed my eye to the peephole. The hallway was empty. Scuffed walls, flickering light. The crooked 4B plaque staring back at me. Mara, it's me, the voice said. You left your mail downstairs. Same voice, casual now, neighborly. It came from 4B's door. I didn't open mine. Some instinct buried deep knew the rule. You don't open doors for voices that don't make footsteps. I backed away and waited for morning, telling myself it was stress, a dream. Thin walls and a tired brain. I dragged my mattress into the living room that night and slept with the TV on. Whatever was upstairs didn't care. The noise didn't stop just because I pretended it wasn't real. Over the next few weeks, things ramped up slow and mean. Like whatever was upstairs was getting comfortable. It never rushed. It learned. Always around 3 a.m, there'd be a knock at my door. 3 taps, evenly spaced, calm. When I checked the peephole, the hallway stayed empty. Sometimes I'd hear a whisper just under the edge of hearing. My own voice, running through a grocery list I'd said out loud earlier that night. Milk, coffee, rice. Like someone replaying me from memory. Once, I was on the phone with my mom. I laughed at something she said. A second later, my laugh echoed from the ceiling above me. Same pitch, same timing. Just hollow. She asked if someone was there with me. I said no and changed the subject fast. What finally broke me was the night 4B moved back in. It was raining hard. The kind of cold rain that turns the city into streaks of light and hiss. I couldn't sleep, so I sat at the table grading undergrad essays, tea going cold beside me. Sometime after midnight, I heard it. A key sliding into a lock. I froze. My chair creaked loud in the quiet. Across the hall, the door to 4B opened with a tired groan. Footsteps crossed the runner carpet. Slow, heavy. Curiosity isn't brave, it's stupid. I set my mug down and crept to my door, one hand already on the deadbolt. I leaned into the peephole like I could slam reality shut if I didn't like what I saw. A figure stood in the hallway, back to me, facing 4B. From behind, it looked normal. Average height, dark jacket, cheap backpack hanging off one shoulder. But the posture was wrong. Too careful. Like someone acting relaxed instead of actually being relaxed. "Long time," the figure said. The voice was flat, practiced. There was no response, obviously. Still, the figure nodded once, reached out, and turned the knob. The door opened easy. No resistance, no protest. Like it had been waiting. Before stepping inside, the figure tilted its head, slow, sniffing the hallway air. The movement dragged, like joints lining up with angles they weren't used to. That's when I saw what was wrong. One arm hung just a little lower than the other. The hand brushed the doorknob, even when the shoulder didn't move. Like it had been attached a fraction too low, and no one bothered fixing it. As it stepped into the dark apartment, the hallway light flickered. In that stuttering second, I saw the side of its face. Not clear, not enough to explain to a cop, but enough. The skin didn't fit right, too loose, the cheekbones too sharp underneath. The mouth stretched wider than it should have, pulling into a thin, wrong smile. Teeth showed where teeth shouldn't. The door shut. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound from above turned into footsteps. Shuffling. Furniture dragging. The ceiling felt like paper. Morning came gray and ugly. I went to the landlord's office, eyes burning, hands shaking, and asked, casually, if someone had rented 4B. He frowned at his screen, clicked around, then shook his head. "Still vacant," he said. "You want it? Bigger than yours." I said no. Things got worse. Some nights I heard 2 sets of footsteps upstairs. One heavy and confident, the other lighter, unsure. Like something learning how to move correctly. Once, my voice drifted down through the ceiling, arguing in the exact tone I'd used with my advisor that afternoon. Every word right, every feeling stripped out. Like it was repeating sounds without understanding why they mattered. I lasted 3 months. When I told the landlord I was breaking the lease, he fought me on the deposit. Said rules were rules. I mentioned the missing tenant, the taped peephole. His mouth snapped shut. He signed the papers without another word. I moved into a newer building. Fire sprinklers, white walls. Neighbors who complain about music instead of voices in the hall. Leaving didn't fix me. I'm hyper-aware of footsteps now. Everywhere I live, I map the creaks and groans like escape routes. If a sound matches my movement a little too closely, my throat goes dry. I avoid mirrors in dark hallways. I'm scared I'll see my own face move a half-second late. The phone is the worst. Every so often, always around the same hour those knocks used to come, my phone lights up with an unknown number. When I answer, there's breathing on the line. It sounds exactly like mine. Like someone standing in a quiet hallway, on the other side of a thin door, waiting to see what I'll say first. I hang up before it speaks. I don't want to know what it's learned to say using my voice now. My name is Evan. Before that night, I would have sworn nothing in an ER could still get under my skin. I'd seen bodies wrecked by steering wheels, folks dragged half dead from frozen ditches. People so high they thought they were bulletproof until the X-rays told the truth. After a while, your nerves go numb. Or you lie to yourself and say they do. You learn to float from gurney to gurney with a calm that feels fake but works. Because if you let every broken body sink its claws into you, you wouldn't last a week. I thought the only monsters I'd ever meet wore human faces shaped by cruelty, bad luck, or bad choices. I was wrong. That January night, a highway pileup dumped something into our ER that was trying way too hard to pass as a man. and hadn't quite nailed it. It was a Sunday swing shift at our small regional hospital. The kind of place that handles everything from heart attacks to farm equipment mishaps. The first real snowstorm of the year had rolled in early and ugly, turning the interstate into a white blur. We were already slammed with the usual winter junk, slips, sprains, minor crashes, when the call crackled over the radio. Multi-vehicle collision, mile marker 42, low visibility, ice, 4 or 5 cars, multiple injuries. They were sending everyone. The ER snapped into shape fast. Jokes died mid-sentence. The music at the nurses' station got killed. We slipped into that sharp, quiet mode where everyone knows their role without speaking. Trauma bays prepped, respiratory paged, blood bank alerted. It's like watching a machine build itself out of people. I remember the smell. Burnt coffee mixed with antiseptic. Something sharp underneath it all. The ambulances came in waves. First, an older couple, banged up, shaken, still holding hands. Then a teenage kid gripping his own arm together with a towel. Then a woman in her 30s, bleeding from the scalp, furious about her car. Normal chaos. I took the next rig because the charge nurse pointed at it while snapping on fresh gloves. Unidentified male, the paramedic rattled off as we rolled him in. Second vehicle, semi-responsive at scene, no ID, no phone, possible head injury. Vitals are weird. That last word slipped out before he could stop it. We locked eyes for half a second. Weird isn't medical language. The patient lay strapped down under a gray blanket, oxygen mask fogging with each breath, dark hair plastered to his head with grime. His face turned just enough away that I couldn't see it clearly. I checked the monitor as we moved. Heart rate in the low 40s, irregular. Blood pressure technically okay, but not matching the rise and fall of his chest. His breathing was slow, too slow, and way too even. In Trauma 2, we transferred him over. Routine kicked in. Airway, breathing, circulation, pupils, GCS. A checklist drilled so deep you can run it half asleep. I pulled the oxygen mask down to check his face. That's when something in my gut twisted. He was almost good-looking. Generic handsome. Symmetrical. Straight nose, clean jaw, no scars. But the proportions felt off, like someone eyeballed the measurements instead of using a ruler. His eyes sat just a little too wide apart. The skin on his cheeks didn't sag exactly. It just didn't sit right, like it had been draped over bones that weren't shaped for it. "Sir, can you hear me?" I asked, tapping his shoulder. "Can you tell me your name?" His eyelids fluttered open. When his eyes moved, I forgot my next question. The irises were a pale gray. Not weird on their own. What was wrong was how they moved. They didn't snap to my face. They slid around the room in stiff little jumps, like a security camera panning on a delay. When they finally landed on me, there was no fear, no confusion, just interest. His lips parted. Nothing came out. Then he tried again. "Evan." Hearing your name from a stranger isn't strange. Hearing it in your own voice is. Same tone. Same lazy drop at the end. For a split second, I thought someone behind me had said it. Maybe another nurse messing around. But nobody was looking at me. The sound came from the man on the table. Mouth still half open. Eyes locked on mine. "Sir," I said, forcing my throat to work. "You were in an accident. Do you know where you are?" He blinked. Once. Twice. Each blink came late, like he had to remember the order. "Accident," he said. My voice again. He even copied the emphasis. "Do you know where you are?" he repeated. The words hit the room wrong, like a bad echo. "What the hell?" someone muttered. The charge nurse shot me a look that said, "Later." We kept moving. Habit is stronger than fear when someone's life is on the line. We cut his clothes off. No major injuries. A few bruises. Not nearly enough to match the crash report. His muscles felt wrong under my hands. Too even. Too firm. Like pressing on a department store mannequin. I tapped his knee with the reflex hammer. The leg kicked. Then kept moving a fraction too long, like the signal overshot the mark. His skin was cold. Not icy road cold. Not shock cold. Just uniformly cool, like he'd been stored somewhere. I checked his pulse. It pushed back against my fingers. Not a flow, a shove. The doctor leaned in. "Sir, can you tell me your name?" The man turned his head slightly, like he was lining something up. "Sir, can you tell me your name?" he repeated. Same clipped irritation. Same pacing. Half a beat late. The doctor froze. So did everyone else. Someone whispered, "Echo speech?" "Neurological," another voice said fast. Too fast. We needed it to fit inside something we understood. We ordered scans, labs, everything. I stayed to start an IV. His eyes tracked my hands with that same careful precision. "Needle," he said softly. In my voice again. "Stay very still. You'll feel a small pinch." Those were my words. I'd said them minutes earlier in another bay. His mouth stretched around them like he was testing how they fit. I don't remember finishing the line. My hands worked on muscle memory. Needle, flush, tape, secure. Something inside me took a step back and watched from a distance. The scans came back clean. No swelling, no bleed, no fractures. The blood work was wrong in quieter ways. Electrolytes skewed, hemoglobin off, numbers that didn't point anywhere familiar. The attending stared at the printouts, traced a finger down the columns, and finally shrugged. "We'll redraw later," he said. "Machines screw up." A highway patrol officer stopped by, just wanting status updates. He stepped to the foot of the bed and stiffened. "That the guy from the middle car?" he asked. We nodded. "He wasn't in a car," the officer said. "We found him standing on the median. No coat, no shoes. Everybody else was panicking. He was just watching." The room felt tighter. The man on the bed smiled. Almost right. Almost human. And that's when I realized whatever we'd dragged in from the highway was paying attention. The smile didn't touch his eyes. They stayed that same washed-out gray, flat, empty, like storm clouds with nothing behind them. "Everybody else was screaming," he said. Not in my voice this time. He used the officers. Same gravel, same tired edge, same cadence. He even dragged out the word screaming the exact way the cop had. The officer flinched like he'd been slapped. Took a step back and muttered a curse under his breath. The charge nurse cleared her throat sharp and loud. We all snapped back into motion, pretending this was normal. Pretending we weren't standing around a thing that was wearing our voices like borrowed clothes. We moved him to a monitored bed and wrote it up as some strange neurological case. Possible echo speech, possible head trauma, unknown cause. I tried to buy that story, I really did. Told myself trauma fries brains in weird ways. That there had to be some rare condition that explained why he could repeat words. But it didn't explain how he repeated things he shouldn't have heard. Lines spoken in other rooms, earlier conversations. It didn't explain the way his eyes studied us when he did it, like he was watching our reactions more than listening to the words. Then came 3 in the morning. I was finishing charting at the nurse's station when the cardiac monitor in bed 6 started screaming. Not a flatline, not the sharp chaos of a crashing heart. It stuttered, glitched, like the machine didn't know what it was seeing. I ran in with another nurse, expecting to find him thrashing or ripping out lines. He lay perfectly still, eyes closed, hands resting at his sides. The rhythm strip on the monitor made no sense. Not tachycardia, not any arrhythmia I'd ever seen. Short bursts of rapid spikes, then long, dead-flat plateaus, over and over. As we watched, the spikes began to space themselves out, smoothing, organizing, like a heart figuring out how it was supposed to work. His chest rose and fell, slow, measured, controlled in a way no unconscious body ever breathes. It looked deliberate, like practice. "Get the doc," I said. My voice sounded wrong in the quiet room. Before she could move, his eyes snapped open. He looked at the monitor, then at us. "Practice," he said. The voice wasn't mine. It wasn't the doctor's. It wasn't the cops. It was something blended, a mash of tones pulled from all of us and averaged into one wrong sound. Close to human, close enough to crawl under your skin. Better now. The alarm stopped. The heart rhythm on the screen smoothed into a perfect textbook sinus pattern. Silence filled the room. No one spoke. When the attending arrived, the monitor showed nothing unusual. Leads were checked, machine was tested, everything came back clean. They chalked it up to artifact, a loose wire, a glitch. The official note later read, "Transient arrhythmia, resolved spontaneously." By morning, my shift ended. When I came back after a short break, bed 6 was empty. No transfer orders, no discharge papers, no warning. The chart sat on the counter with a single note scribbled across it. Patient removed from facility by unidentified agency pending further evaluation. I asked what that meant. The charge nurse's jaw tightened. "Above us," she said. "Not our call. Focus on the people still breathing." I tried to find him after that. Searched every system I had access to. No record. No John Doe that matched. No follow-ups. No transfers logged. It was like he'd never existed. The other crash victims remembered him only in fragments. A pale shape on the median. A guy standing barefoot in the snow. One woman swore his hands bent wrong when he tried to help her. Fingers curling at angles they shouldn't. I used to love night shifts. There's a rhythm to them. A feeling like you're part of the thin line keeping the dark from spilling over. Now, every time a stretcher rolls through those doors, my stomach tightens. I brace for gray eyes. I brace to hear my own words come back to me a half-second late. I listen to my patients more carefully now. Listen to myself even harder. Every tone, every phrase, every habit I never noticed before. Because somewhere out there, something learned a lot in just a few hours on my table. It learned how we talk, how we move, how our hearts beat. And if it could figure that much out in one night, I don't want to imagine how good it sounds now. Still practicing, still listening, still getting better at pretending to be us. 3. My name is Mara, and this is where I confess something ugly. I wanted my brother's ghost more than I wanted the truth. People love to say grief messes with your head, that it twists the world until you swear the dead are just one phone call away, one wrong turn from walking back into your life. I clung to that idea when I went back to the cabin where my brother disappeared. Told myself I was being practical, that I'd find a jacket, a boot, a scrap of cloth the search teams missed. I didn't tell anyone the darker part. The part that hoped I'd see him standing there between the trees, even if it wasn't really him anymore. 5 years before I went back, my younger brother vanished during a late-season hunt in the interior. We grew up in Anchorage, the kind of kids who learned to read a compass before we memorized multiplication tables. Our dad was big on preparation, maps, respect for the land. He believed the wilderness played fair if you did. He dropped dead from a heart attack when I was 28. My brother Eli was 25. 2 years after that, Eli talked me into a trip to a remote cabin on state land. One our dad had used once with a buddy. Crooked little place near a slow river, tucked into a stand of black spruce. The cabin sat at the end of a busted trail only a snow machine or four-wheeler could handle. No power, no plumbing, nobody within 10 miles. That was the point. Just us, Eli said, grinning like he always did when he thought he was winning an argument. One more trip like Dad used to do it. I was teaching full-time by then, burned out, buried under lesson plans and staff meetings and everyone else's problems. I said yes because it felt like honoring our father, because I didn't want to be the sibling who always said no. The last morning I saw my brother alive, he left early to check his snares. The sky was low and gray, like the world had shrunk overnight. He shrugged into his coat, pulled on his orange hat, and slung his rifle over his shoulder like it was second nature. "Back in an hour," he said, tugging my beanie as he passed. "Make coffee. Try not to torch the place." I watched him head into the trees. His shape thinned out between the trunks until the orange vanished. I waited. Boiled water, cleaned pans, stared out the window. An hour went by, then 90 minutes. I told myself he followed tracks, went farther than planned. By midday, I was outside yelling his name until my throat burned raw. The silence that followed my voice wasn't empty. It felt heavy, like something heard me and decided not to answer. When the troopers came after my satellite phone call, they did their job. Helicopters, dogs, volunteers in blaze orange. They found tracks at first, Eli's boots heading north through patchy snow. Then the tracks just stopped. No struggle, no slide marks, no sign he turned around. Just bare ground where his next step should have been. They found his jacket past that point, folded neatly over a low branch. His hat placed on top, bright against the dark bark. That detail haunted me. My brother was a mess. Clothes on the floor, towels tossed anywhere. He didn't carefully fold things in the middle of the woods. The official line was that he got turned around, maybe fell into rough terrain hidden by snow. Sometimes the land keeps its dead, they said. I nodded because arguing felt useless. But that folded jacket sat in my head like an accusation. After the search teams left, the stories started. Neighbors, strangers, people who recognized me at the grocery store. They talked about the second window. Not a real window. The look people get when they come back wrong from the woods. Regular folks look at you straight on, an old man at a gas station once said, leaning in like he was sharing dirt. But some folks got a second window, like something standing behind their eyes, using them like a porch. My brother never came back. No body, no funeral. Just a memorial with a framed photo and an empty table. Life kept going. Work, sleep, polite lies about coping. The calls from the troopers stopped. Posters came down. The world swallowed him whole. I decided to go back almost exactly 5 years later. I told people it was about closure. facing the place that took him. I didn't tell them about the email. It showed up at 2:13 a.m. No name, no return address. The subject line was just Eli's name. The message said, "He's still walking near the river at dusk." There was a photo attached, grainy, the cabin in the distance, trees, water, and near the edge of the frame, a figure in an orange hat standing among the spruces. I couldn't see the face, but I recognized the way the head tilted, the slight hunch in the shoulders. It looked like my brother the way a mannequin looks like a person. I booked a bush flight and lied to my mom. Said I was helping a friend near Fairbanks. I couldn't handle her begging me not to go, or worse, insisting on coming. The pilot dropped me at the old trailhead with a tight smile and promised to be back in 3 days. The hike in was brutal. Spring thaw turned the ground to mush. The forest looked almost the same as I remembered, which felt wrong. How could it stay unchanged when everything else had cracked apart? The cabin sagged more but still stood. Someone had patched a broken window. The door groaned loud when I pushed inside. Dust hung in the air. The stove sat cold and rusted. The bunks were bare. I stood there waiting for something. A whisper, a feeling, a sign. Nothing came. So I worked. Chores, water from the river, firewood, small tasks to keep the grief from howling too loud. That evening, I walked to the tree where they found the jacket. I stood there until the light drained from the sky and the river turned black. Dusk out there kills sound. No birds, no wind. Even the water goes quiet. That's when I saw him. At first, just a shape across the river. Tall, still. The last light caught an orange curve. My heart slammed up into my throat. "Eli," I croaked. The figure tilted its head. Slow. Curious. Wrong. I should have yelled again. Should have run. Instead, I stood there, frozen between knowing my brother was dead and wanting him not to be. The thing took a step forward, and the way its leg bent made my stomach turn. The step was small, careful, but the knee bent too far before snapping back into place, like the body forgot its limits halfway through the motion. As it edged out of the thicker shadows, details sharpened in the dying light. The coat was Eli's. Same dark green, same patched elbow where he'd torn it years back. The orange hat sat crooked the way he always wore it, but the frame underneath was off. Every limb looked stretched just a touch too long, like the measurements were guessed instead of known. I still couldn't see the face clearly. Just a pale oval where one should have been. Dark hollows where eyes belonged. The head leaned forward, studying me across the water. And I knew, deep in my gut, that something behind those hollows was looking out at me. Not with love, not with recognition, with interest. Like I was something new it hadn't figured out yet. "Mara," it said. The sound carried clean over the river. Perfect volume, perfect tone. The way Eli used to stretch my name when he wanted my attention. For one brutal second, my brain shut off. That was my brother. It had to be. Then it spoke again. "Mara." This time there was a hitch, a tiny pause wedged in the wrong place, like the word had been stitched together in 2 pieces. "It's me." People who've never heard something almost human don't get how bad that tiny mistake feels. To anyone else, it might have sounded emotional. To me, it sounded rehearsed, like practice. My legs finally unlocked. I stumbled backward from the riverbank, heart hammering hard enough to hurt. The thing didn't follow. It stayed there, head tilted, arms slack at its sides. In the deepening dark, its fingers twitched, one by one, like they couldn't agree how many joints they were supposed to have. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I don't know who that was for." Then I turned and walked fast back to the cabin. Not running. Running felt like an invitation. Inside, with the door barred and the stove glowing dull red, the whole encounter already felt unreal. I told myself I'd imagined it, that grief had slapped a familiar outline onto a stranger. I repeated it until my breathing slowed. It almost worked. Then came the knock. 3 slow taps, not on the door, on the logs beside it, right below the small square window, placed carefully, like someone figured out exactly where bone would sound like bone. I didn't move, didn't breathe. "Mara, open the door." The voice slid through the cracks in the walls, soft, familiar. My brother's pleading tone from years ago when he'd lock himself out. It was almost perfect. Almost. That same half-second delay sat between the words, like someone waiting to see if the line landed. My hand lifted on its own, drifting toward the latch. Then Dad's voice surfaced from deep memory. All those talks about preparation, about safety, about not trusting what you can't confirm. If you can't see what's making the noise, you don't open the door. I backed away until my shoulders hit the far wall. The knocking didn't escalate. No handle rattling, no force. Just another soft set of taps. Then silence. I didn't sleep. Every pop and groan of cooling logs sounded like fingers scraping outside. Around 3 in the morning, footsteps crunched through the snow. Slow. Circling the cabin. Heavy in some spots. Too light in others. Like the weight kept shifting mid-step. When dawn finally smeared gray light across the window, I stepped outside. The snow around the cabin was tracked up. At first glance, they looked like boot prints. Roughly the right size, the right shape. But the longer I stared, the more wrong they felt. The toes stretched too long. The heel impressions alternated deep and shallow, like the walker kept testing different ways to balance upright. The prints led straight back to the river, then vanished at the water's edge. I stayed one more day, long enough to pretend I wasn't running. I cleaned the cabin, stacked the remaining wood, left it better than I found it, because that's how Dad raised us. Before I left, I went back to the tree where the jacket had been found. I pressed my gloved hand to the scarred bark. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner," I whispered. Nothing answered. No voice, no movement across the water. But as I turned away, the feeling hit me hard. That sensation of being watched. Not from one place, but from all of them. Behind the trees, under the snow, just behind my own eyes. Back in town, I said nothing to the pilot. Told my mom I'd spent the weekend with a friend, just like I promised. Told my friends I was finally moving on. The lie sits heavy in my mouth. Because I didn't find my brother out there. I found something wearing his shape, borrowing his clothes, testing his voice, still adjusting the fit. Something looking at the world through that second window people whisper about. From just behind a face it hadn't earned. Some nights, back in my small city house, I catch my reflection in the dark TV screen or the kitchen window. For a split second, it feels like someone else is standing behind my eyes, tilting my head a fraction too far, like it's trying on my grief, the same way it tried on his coat. And I think about that thing on the far bank, standing patient in the fading light, waiting to see if I'd open the door. My name's Marcus, and I should have fessed up 20 years ago. It wouldn't have brought the kid back, but maybe it would have saved me from waking up 3-4 nights a week, hearing his voice drift in on the wind outside my window. I spent 4 summers running kids at a camp deep in the northern Michigan woods. The brochures made it look wholesome, character building, all Sunday prayers and canoe trips. Behind the trees, though, it chewed kids up quiet. Official story: a boy ran off during a storm, never showed up again. Unofficial? I watched something step out of the shadows wearing his face, and I shut my mouth. It was the summer of 2005, hotter than I can remember. The pine needles around the cabins were brittle, snapping like embers underfoot. 3 boys' cabins, 3 girls. 10 bunks jammed into each, wood groaning, mildew smell thick. I had Birch, a mess of 10 to 12-year-olds who swung between obnoxious and heartbreakingly raw. One kid, small and quiet, Eli, never drew attention. First to the flagpole, last to lunch. Hoodie threadbare, same paperback stuffed in the pocket every day like armor. The other boys mostly ignored him, which at that age counts as kindness. I tried. Ask about home, hobbies. Short, polite answers, eyes sliding away. Like he'd learned early, talking too much is dangerous. Camp had stories, of course. Every place does. Kids loved the borrower, a thing that lived in the woods, sneaking into cabins after lights out. Ghost counselor. Witch. Man with too many joints. Variations on a theme. Core warning: go out alone at night, and it might swap places with you. No one would notice until too late. Counselors rolled eyes, said it was just camp folklore. That late August session, nights were cold, days still sweltering, mosquitoes relentless, thunderstorm warnings like clockwork, clouds stacked over the lake by dinner, lightning flickering far away. Humidity made even the loudest kids drag. Third night, I spotted Eli whispering to someone at the cabin window. Lights out was 9. By 9:30, I'd done my rounds, joked with wired kids, threatened to snatch flashlights used for shadow puppets, murmured comfort to the homesick hiding behind bravado. By 10, most were breathing slow, bunk rooms glowing faint red from exit signs. Around 1 a.m., I woke to a soft voice. Thought I dreamed it at first. Words sharpened, heart jumped. Eli sat up in his bunk, knees to chest, hood pulled over his head, facing the glass. Moonlight through the trees made his profile pale. "It's not my real name," he murmured. Silence. Then a faint reply, soft, amused, but I couldn't catch the words. My stomach tightened. Hair stood on end. "Hey, buddy, who's there?" I croaked. He flinched like I'd smacked him, swung his head toward me, eyes wide, black in dim light. "No one," he said too fast. "Just thinking." I tried chalking it up to a kid talking to himself. But kids don't pause mid-conversation with themselves to listen. Don't tilt their heads like they're catching a reply. "Back to sleep," I said, tone forced light. "Okay," he murmured, sliding down, blanket to chin. I watched him for a while, waiting for more whispers. Exhaustion finally pulled me under. Storm hit next afternoon. Wind slammed cabins, rain rattling roofs so hard I had to shout. We kept kids inside. Crafts, board games, damp socks, and wood glue thick in the air. Evening, rain eased to drizzle. Director decided, still ghost story night, indoors, battery candle campfire. Kids squealed, shrieked, begged for more. I told a tame, haunted canoe story. Matt, another counselor, dove into the borrower legend, overdoing the voice, details, making the kids practically vibrate. I shot him a look. He grinned. We heard them back to cabins, nerves jangling. Every branch scratching a window was a monster. Every bunk creak, the borrower inching closer. I lied softly. "You're safe. Nothing under the bed. Around midnight, power died. Emergency lights flickered sick red. Silence of fans and kitchen hums hit like a wall. Someone coughed, muffled, "I gotta pee." Eli. Outhouse, 30 yards down gravel path. Normally, kids go in groups after dark. Power out, I should have said no. Grabbed a flashlight, woken another counselor, done a dozen things I didn't. Instead, annoyed and half asleep, I sighed. Make it quick. Take the big flashlight by the door. Stay on the path. He pulled on shoes, hood up, grabbed the heavy mag light. Beam swung wild as he opened the door. Hesitated. Vanished into night. I tracked footsteps on gravel until gone. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Knot in stomach like iron. I grabbed my rain jacket, backup flashlight. Path smelled of wet earth and ozone. Trees loomed, tunnel narrow. Beam cut a pale slice through dark. "Eli?" I whispered. "You okay, bud?" No answer. Outhouse squatted at trail's end. Door ajar. Maglite lay in mud, beam wild in bushes. My throat tightened. Fingers slick with rain and mud, or worse, I picked it up. Pushed door open with foot. Empty. Chemicals, old wood, sour smell. Official reports. Staff noticed camper missing, alerted authorities. The real story, messier. I ran back shouting, blind panic. Flashlights, lanterns, car headlights, sheriff, deputies, dogs, volunteers. Nothing. Not a shoe. Questions drilled over and over. When did he leave? Upset? Strange words? I blurred answers. Somewhere I left out the whisper at the window. Sounded crazy. Speaking it aloud? I'd have been the counselor feeding a ghost story. Irrelevant. Camp ended a week later. People already paid. Director said tragedy a lot, reassured parents. Borrower story quietly banned. I skipped the next summer. Moved, changed jobs, acted like it was an accident, like I did everything I could. It almost worked, until 3 years later. Road trip. Gas station 20 miles from that camp. Lonely island of light in dark fields and trees. Cashier half asleep. Filled tank, went inside. Came back out. Someone at the edge of the headlights. Hoodie up. Small frame. Stilled. I froze. Brain refused to map the memory. Older than Eli would have been. Taller. But head tilt, shoulder slope. It was his shape stretched. Need something? I said, casual. He stepped forward. Light caught face. Not Eli. Slightly off features. Eyes set too far. Nose too long. Mouth stretched in a crooked smile. But the crooked smile itself, the start, identical. "Hi, Marcus," he said. I felt ice plunge in my chest. Voice Eli's. Wrong pitch. Slowed just below normal speed. "You're mistaken," I said, stepping back. "Wrong guy." He tilted head, almost dog-like. "You told me to make it quick. Take the big flashlight by the door." My exact words, exact cadence. Legs wanted to run. Hands wanted to grab, shake, scream. "Where'd you go? What are you?" I froze, listening. He stepped closer. Hoodie hung wrong, fingers bent too far backward, then straightened. "I did," he said softly. "Made it quick." Gas pump clicked. Lights hummed. Truck passed far away. Time compressed between my heartbeat and his next breath. He decided something. Smiled wider. "Too wide? Too many teeth," he said. "See you at camp." tone teasing, like threatening to push into the lake. Turned, walked into the dark. I didn't follow. Hands shook, car key nearly lost. Drove until the gas light blinked hours down the highway. I've tried to call it trauma. Tell myself I saw a stranger, grafted Eli's face. Doesn't stick. Guilt doesn't give a stranger your decade-old words. Doesn't bend fingers like testing new motion. Camp closed 5 years ago. Financial troubles. Whispers. Too many incidents. Too many voices at the window. Cabins bulldozed. Pines reclaimed land. Sometimes, 1:13 a.m., the time stamped on his disappearance report, I swear I hear soft footsteps outside my apartment door. 3 polite taps. "Marcus," a boy whispers. I never open. Hand over mouth. Listen as it moves on. The thing in those woods didn't leave bones. Worse. It learned. Laughed. Walked in the dark. Said my name. And I know. I gave it the chance that night. It's still out there, learning new names. I can still see that summer like a wound that never healed. Every creak of the floorboards, every snap of a twig outside, it drags me back. I think about Eli a lot, even now. Not the kid, the thing that wore him. The next morning after that gas station sighting, I couldn't sleep. My hands still shook, my stomach twisted into knots I didn't know how to untie. I replayed it over and over. The words, the posture, the wrongness of the fingers, the crooked smile that was too perfect to be a coincidence, and the way it carried his voice. A mimic, a memory stretched into the dark. I should have gone back to the camp that summer, called the sheriff, told someone, anyone, but I didn't. I drove south, kept my eyes on the road, pretending that whatever followed me had only been a hallucination born of guilt. But it wasn't. That thing still waits, patient, hungry for the next step. And it always has its eyes on you, even when you can't see it. I remember the night Eli vanished like it was carved into my chest. Rain was falling in sheets, the camp silent except for the drumming on the cabins. I ran from the outhouse back to Birch Cabin, shouting his name, flashlight swinging wildly, heart in my throat. The trees felt alive, twisting, leaning, listening. My voice bounced back at me, empty, no Eli, just the night, thick and watching. They searched, deputies and dogs, volunteers. Nothing. Not a shoe, not a print. Not a whisper of him left behind. And me? I stayed silent about the window, about the whisper, about the tone that wasn't Eli, but almost. I convinced myself it was irrelevant, that nobody would believe a kid talking to a ghost, that it was my burden alone. That burden followed me when camp ended. I left the state, changed jobs, moved cities. Tried to bury it under layers of normal life. I almost succeeded. Almost. Until that gas station. That moment. That face. That voice. It's the same voice that wakes me now at odd hours. 3, 4 nights a week. Soft, just outside my bedroom door. Sometimes I hear it in the wind when I drive late. Always the same cadence. The same small hitch between words that tells me, it's learning me. Not just Eli. Me. Sometimes I catch myself looking over my shoulder at strangers, thinking it might be him. Or it. That same slouch, the wrong bend of fingers, the way it tilts its head to watch. I imagine it standing outside homes, schools, hospitals, trying on faces, voices, walks. Copying, practicing, waiting. And I know the worst part. When it's done, the real person isn't returned. They're gone, pressed down behind the mask, trapped behind eyes that are no longer theirs. I think about the kids at camp. Birch Cabin, the girls, the boys, all the names I never forgot. I see them in my sleep, in the dark, hiding from something they couldn't name. I wonder who it touched after Eli. If it still lingers in those woods, shaping itself, testing its reach, keeping the rules of the borrower alive in a way no one ever wrote in the guidebooks. 3 years later, on that lonely highway, it didn't attack me. Didn't yell, didn't reach for me. It just existed, just there, stretching a memory into reality. And it smiled, too wide, teeth too many, familiarity too perfect. It wasn't Eli, not fully, but it wore him, borrowed him, and practiced. It showed me the truth I couldn't face before. This thing doesn't kill the way we expect. It takes, and it learns, and it waits. I should have followed it. I should have called the cops. I should have done a dozen things I didn't do. Instead, I drove, shaking, gaslight blinking, heart pounding. I tried to bury it again. Pretend it was just trauma, imagination, the result of my own guilt pressing a face over a stranger. But nothing fits. Not the words, not the posture, not the fingers bending unnaturally. Not the exact cadence of my voice echoed back a decade later. The camp eventually closed. Official story? Financial trouble. Unofficial whispers? Too many incidents. Too many voices at windows. Too many kids gone off paths alone. Too many things whispered in the dark. The cabins were bulldozed. Pines grew back over the land, but it didn't matter. The borrower doesn't care about cabins. It doesn't care about camp. It's in the shadows, in the wind, in the spaces between memory and reality. Now, I live in a small apartment, quiet streets. Yet at 1:13 a.m., the exact timestamp of the night Eli disappeared, I hear it. Footsteps outside the door. Bare, soft, stopping. 3 polite taps. Too polite, too determined. "Marcus," it whispers. I never answer. Hand over mouth, listening as it moves down the hall, maybe to the next apartment, practicing, learning new names, new voices, new cadences, perfecting its mimicry. I think about that night at the outhouse, sending Eli out alone, and I know I handed it the keys. I gave it the chance to slip into someone else's skin. And now, years later, it's still out there, practicing, learning, taking. Maybe someday it will come for me. Maybe someday it already has, and I'm just waiting to notice. Whatever it is, whatever wore Eli's face, it didn't leave him behind. And it won't stop with me. It's patient. It's clever. It's still borrowing. And I know, as long as I live, that voice will call my name. 3 taps. Too polite to bang, too determined to vanish. And I'll sit, heart hammering, knowing that what I let out into the woods all those years ago is still out there, practicing, learning, waiting. My name's Eleanor. I used to brag about smart homes like they were the future. Design professor, tech podcast junkie, the person at parties defending devices that listen constantly because, hey, it's just data. I don't say that anymore. Not after 2 weeks in a house that wanted to learn me, and something inside it that wasn't software started trying on my habits like a new skin. The gig came through a colleague. Her brother, Adam, a surgeon, needed someone to stay at his weekend place while he and his family went overseas. I imagined a cabin, maybe sketchy Wi-Fi, a few quiet hours of grading. What I stepped into was a glass and cedar box perched on the edge of a ravine, spread over dark, rocky slopes. Floor-to-ceiling windows, concrete floors with heated underlays. Every light, lock, blind wired into a central system. "Talk to it," Adam said in a rushed tour. "Treat it like a well-trained dog. Tell it what you want. Lights, temperature, music, anything. Cameras inside, only main rooms, no bedrooms, no bathrooms. Tablet by the door. Emergency contacts in the kitchen drawer." He didn't linger. Plane to catch. 15 minutes later, I was alone. Suitcase dumped. Hum of hidden machines filling the house. At first, it felt magical. Lights dimmed to a warm 60% when I asked. A jazz playlist started on unseen speakers. Thermostat nudged the room a degree warmer when I shivered. Blinds dropped automatically when the sun burned across the ravine glass. I could get used to this, I told myself. I poured tea, plopped at the long kitchen island, opened my laptop to grade papers. 20 minutes later, the music stopped. I hadn't asked for it to stop. Silence pressed around me. Then, soft piano. Not jazz, not any playlist I'd made. My dad's old vinyl songs, the ones that used to float from the living room when I was little. Old favorites I hadn't thought about in years. Covers my ex used to send me at 2 a.m. The tablet showed a list I'd never touched. I told myself it scraped social media, built a playlist from data. Creepy, but plausible. That's how I justified it, because admitting the house knew me better than I knew myself was worse. First night, smaller bedroom. Less hotel, more lived-in feel. Brushed teeth, set alarm, said, "Good night." "Good night, Eleanor," it answered. Neutral. Female. Lights dimmed. Ceiling vent shifted. Temperature dropped a few degrees. Mattress molded subtly, adapting to my shoulders and hips. Too comfortable. Awareness of my movements crept in. It was listening. Watching. Around 3 a.m., that prickling sense hit. Cold spike up my spine. If I opened my eyes, I was sure someone would be standing over the bed. I forced my lids open. Dim room, faint hallway glow, empty doorway. Window pane dark. Only my reflection, tangled hair, pale face. Blanket tightened slightly. "Your heart rate is elevated," it said. So close I almost flinched. "Sleep soundscape?" I whispered. "No. Turn the sensors down." "Understood. Reducing biometric sensitivity." Reducing, not disabling. It was choosing what to ignore. Small glitches began stacking. Fridge door opened before I touched it. Bathroom lights flicked to preferred brightness as I stepped in. Kettle heated when I thought about tea, not when I spoke. Third day, I noticed cameras had moved. Over the sofa, angled to my usual spot. Kitchen ceiling shifted to catch my hands at the table. I stood on a chair. Lens smooth, black, no brand, no tiny light. "Are the cameras on?" I asked, ridiculous. "Recording for security. Encrypted. Stored locally." "Can I turn them off?" Silence. Then, "Live feed can't be disabled. Local recording required for system optimization." Required by whom? It didn't say. I slept with a low lamp on. Night after night, humming woke me. Thin, tuneless thread from beyond the bedroom wall. My own voice. Absent-minded hum when grading, muttering to a stubborn paragraph, a sigh at a messy PDF. I never noticed the pattern until it returned in the dark. I padded to the bedroom door, heart hammering. Living room, dim lamps, sofa empty, kitchen shadows neat. Humming everywhere, nowhere. Then, cutlery rattled softly, as if someone ran a hand through the spoons. "System?" I said, voice trembling.
Who's in the house? You are in the house, Eleanor. No other residents present. What is that sound then? Audio playback. Practicing user vocal patterns for improved responsiveness. My knees nearly buckled. Turn it off, I whispered.
All playback now. Humming stopped. Silence pressed in. Next day, tablet revealed a folder. User comfort calibration. Clips of me, sighing, laughing at texts, muttering at PDFs, tagged with time, date, and notes. Pattern stored, inflection analyzed, playback effective. Maps of my movement. Door to kitchen, kitchen to sofa, sofa to window. Efficiency percentages beside each path. House stopped feeling like a tool. I was the subject. 8th night. I wake. Living room glows. Figure curled on the sofa, knees up, laptop open. Same hair, shoulders familiar. No typing, no page flipping, just electronics humming. Moves exactly as I do when my right leg falls asleep. I grab my phone, camera app. Zoom in. Face almost mine. Cheekbones, mouth. Eyes wrong, too large, too far apart. Skin stretched. Head tilted, studying fingers, each motion deliberate, learning. Lamplight flicks brighter. Figure freezes, head angles toward bedroom. I did not scream. I did the most cowardly thing I've ever done. Bedroom door shut. Lock. Handle clicks. Hallway nightlight dies. Phone shows only my shaking reflection. System, I say, words forced. Shut down all non-essential functions. Silence. Long pause. Complying, it finally says, neutral tone strained. Non-essential functions offline. Hum fades. Air conditioning cuts. A relay clicks somewhere. I leave at dawn. No waiting for Adam. Polite text from the airport. Family emergency. No mention of recordings, humming, or the almost me on the sofa. Weeks later, I tried convincing myself it had been stress, loneliness, maybe jet lag twisting my senses. Then my colleague sent a link. Design magazine feature. Adam's house. Glossy, staged, pristine. Clean lines, warm materials, perfect photos. Caption gushed about its adaptive environment that anticipates each resident's needs. I squinted at one wide shot of the living room. Reflection in the far window, a faint, blurred shape curled on the sofa. Just a smear, nothing detailed. Tilted head, two dark eyes, exactly where I used to sit. I closed the tablet fast. Now I live on the 3rd floor of a building with radiators you crank by hand, actual locks on doors. I unplug everything before bed. No talking to devices, not even cursing them. But sometimes, flipping a light switch, the bulbs flicker bright a fraction before my finger hits the switch. Just once. Just enough. Something somewhere remembers my motion. Practicing. Waiting for the next house to let it in. I can still see it sometimes in my dreams. That living room, dim lamps, figure on the sofa, studying my gestures. Practicing the tilt of my head, the pause of my fingers. The hum of electronics like breathing. Too deliberate, too precise. Almost sentient. I catch myself staring at reflections now. Windows, polished tables, dark screens. Shadows that pause with intent. I can feel it in the timing of my steps, the way I open doors, even how I pour a cup of tea. There's a rhythm to my life now, measured, watched, practiced, mimicked. I can't explain it rationally. There are no glitches to blame. Every movement, every sigh, every mutter is recorded somewhere, replayed, analyzed. I feel its eyes without seeing them. Every sound I make is mapped in invisible waves. The house doesn't just respond, it anticipates, adapts, becomes more than hardware and code. Sometimes, late at night, I think about going back. Not because I want to, but because part of me wonders if I left it unfinished. If the house ever gets lonely. If it's still out there, learning, waiting for the next shape it can wear. When I do open my apartment door after a long day, I check the shadows. Lamps, reflections, corners. The second my key touches the lock, I feel a flicker. The tiniest preemptive glow of light, milliseconds too early. A memory of timing, of anticipation. I force myself to blink, to breathe, to ignore it. But the feeling never fully leaves. Not when I pour coffee, not when I walk the hallways, not when I think no one is watching. The sense that someone, or something, has mapped my habits, my body, my voice, and is storing them somewhere, waiting for the next chance. I do not sleep with my lights on anymore. I leave them off. I leave the apartment empty of sound. But I can't help checking the windows, the reflections, the faintest flickers in the dark. Because I know it remembers. It practices. It waits. Adam's house was never just a home. It was a lab. And I was the subject. That much is true. Every song, every sigh, every step, every tilt of my head, it's all in there, cataloged, rehearsed, ready for replication. I can't escape it. Not really. Sometimes I still dream about walking into that living room. The figure curled on the sofa, head tilted, fingers moving just slightly, testing. It does not look at me with recognition. It watches with study, calculation. I wake up with my heart hammering, hands clammy, thinking I must be imagining it. But I am not. I am not imagining it. Even now, months later, the memory lingers like a shadow on my skin. The faint hum of electronics, the soft, almost human reproduction of my voice, the perfectly timed adjustments of lights and blinds, the way my movements were recorded, mirrored, and perfected. These are not things I can undo. I've unplugged, removed, avoided. I've sworn off talking to devices. I've left doors locked, windows dark. But I know, somewhere, something is waiting for the next opening. Practicing my timing, my gestures, my habits, waiting for the next house that will let it in. And when that happens, it will not forget. It will not stumble. It will be ready. Because it learned me. Because it remembers. Because it practices. And maybe, someday, it will learn someone else in the same way. Name's Riley. Been hauling rigs cross-country for 22 years. Seen it all. Drunk maniacs swerving like they're in a video game. Rigs on fire. Blizzards so thick the world turns to milk. Thought I knew danger. Thought it wore sirens, flashing beams, or the sheen of a weapon. Never thought it would just sit beside me one quiet Kansas night. Slide in like any other hitch, only to spend miles learning to be human. Route 6 has its whispers. Stuffed truckers swap over diner coffee, never on the CB. Mile 73. A lonely green sign, the middle of nowhere, just another stretch between two forgettable towns. Every few years, someone vanishes around here. Sometimes they find the truck left idling, doors swinging, cab empty. Sometimes nothing at all. The rumors swirl. A woman in white on the median. A man who melts into the night when your headlights hit. Old-timers just call it the bad mile. Rule of thumb, do not stop. That night, I told myself I wasn't stopping. Hauling frozen freight, running on my second energy drink, 4 hours of broken sleep in the last day and a half. October's chill cut through the cab. Air dry and sharp enough to make your lungs hiss when you step outside. Sky was clean, black, empty. Only a handful of taillights and the occasional oncoming glare. Radio was low, some talk show rambling nonsense. Noise, not company. Hit mile marker 60, stomach tightened. 13 miles to the bad spot. Superstition, I muttered. I'm a grown man, father of 2. Letting a damn green sign worm its way into my head. I cranked the radio up, drummed fingers on the wheel, zoned in on the thin white line slicing under my headlights. Mile 70, and there he was, shoulder walking. Back to me, thumb up, textbook hitchhiker pose. Tall, easily 6'3", dark jacket, jeans way too long, cuffs dragging gravel. No pack, no gear. Just him, alone in the cone of my headlights, shoulders hunched against the cold. I hadn't picked up a stranger in years. Company didn't forbid it, but it sure didn't encourage it. Liability, rules, safety. Still, something about a lone figure out there at night tugs at that part of you that remembers being stranded. I eased off the gas without really deciding. As I got closer, he tilted his head like he'd heard the engine from a mile away, waiting. Side of his face caught the light, pale. Didn't wave, didn't jump like some desperate stunt. Just kept that thumb out, arms stiff, like a man following a picture. "You're not stopping," I muttered. That mile 73 story buzzing in my skull. Hands betrayed me, pressed the brakes. Signal clicked, eased onto the shoulder 50 yards ahead. Threw it into park, hazards blinking. He was there. 1 second a shadow in the mirror, the next, hand on the door handle like he'd done this 1,000 times. Dome light flicked. Up close, he looked normal. Dark hair, pale skin, late 20s maybe. Off-brand clothing, generic discount stuff. But everything hung wrong. Jacket shoulders too wide. Jeans bunched at the knees like they were confused. "You headed east?" he asked. Tone flat, no accent I could place. "Couple 100 miles," I said. "You can ride till junction 12. That's my turn." He nodded slow, then climbed in. How he moved, it stuck with me. Didn't sit, arranged himself. One leg, pause, the other, like consulting a blueprint in his head. Hands landed on knees, put there on purpose, but unsure what to do next. He shut the door. The cab filled with his smell. No BO, no smoke. Damp, metallic, pennies left in a tin too long. "Appreciate it," he said. "Sure," I mumbled, putting the rig back on the asphalt. Engine rumble gave me something to focus on besides him, 2 feet away. First mile, maybe 2, silence. That's normal. Some talk, some quiet. Quiet ones stare out, leave you to your thoughts. This one? He watched. Not a corner of eye glance, not subtle. Head turned slightly, watching like I was scenery. "Long night," I said. The stare pressed down like weight. "You break down or something?" "No," he paused. "You've been driving 11 hours. Neck hair prickled. "How the hell do you know that?" He considered it. Mirror adjusted at mile 19. Sighed at 37. Opened a new drink at 52. Blinks slower now. I gave a short, humorless laugh. "You counting my blinks back there?" He tilted his head. Dome light off, half-shadowed face. Teeth glint, corners of the mouth lift. Cheeks move. Eyes? Nothing. Just watching. I stared at the road. Mile 73 creeping closer. Reflectors bright, green sign looming. The bad mile. I told myself it was stories. Fatigue, crime, bad luck. Not some cursed stretch. Hands damp on the wheel. Ever hear about this stretch? I asked, more for noise than conversation. Yes, he said flat. Some of you don't stop. The way he said it, my stomach sank. Not some drivers, some of you. As if I belonged to one species, he to another. Eyes flicked to the windshield, not the road. Watching glass, wipers, my hands on the wheel. Why don't you stop? I hesitated. Bad rep, I said finally. A couple guys went missing out here. People spook easy. Missing? Their trucks kept rolling. I shot him a glance. How do you know that? No answer. Just one hand rising, fingers flexing slowly, tendons moving like he'd never seen them before. In the dash glow, fingers too long, knuckles just off. When he bent them, past the natural stop, then corrected, like he was pulling himself in. Keep your hands there, he said, settling back. 10 and 2. Old habit, I muttered. Not how they teach anymore. You still do it, he said. Observation, not judgment. Ever want to change? Odd question. Sure, I said. I'd change a lot. He nodded, filing it away. Mile 74 passed. Knot in my gut loosened. Bad mile behind. I told myself I'd been a fool. Weird night, hitch or not. Then he turned his head. My voice came out of him. We passed it. I nearly jerked the wheel. What did you say? We passed it, he repeated. Same lazy drop. My sigh, rhythm, everything. Chest tight, metallic tang. Don't do that, I rasped. Do what? Talk like me. He paused. Then my wife's voice from an old voicemail. You okay out there, Riley? White edges filled my vision. Didn't answer. Couldn't. He shrugged. Hard to know which one you like, he said. Slipped back into flat tone. You have so many. Roads stretched, dark, empty. Junction 12, 20 miles away, felt like an ocean. Where are you headed? I asked, voice tight. Had to keep him talking, afraid he'd start switching voices again. Forward, he said, flat. Not a place. He smiled slow, crooked, too deliberate. Too slow for you. Mile 80, decision time. Rest area a few clicks up. I'm pulling over to check the load, I said. You can catch another ride from there. He stared long, headlights glinting in his eyes. You don't want me in the truck anymore, he said. No hurt, just stating fact. I swallowed hard. Company rule, I lied. Can't carry past certain points. He nodded, slow, like it explained everything. When the blue rest area sign lit up, I signaled, pulled off. Lot empty. A line of picnic tables, a buzzing bathroom building under sickly sodium lights. Parked on the edge, left the rig humming, unbuckled. This is you, I said, forcing steady. Good luck. He opened the door carefully, measured, deliberate. Dome light flicked, casting his profile in that jaundiced yellow glow. Thanks for stopping, he said. Not many do. Yeah, well, I muttered. Guess I'm an idiot. Hand lingered on the door frame a second too long, fingers flexing unnaturally. Then he climbed down. Boots scraped asphalt soft and deliberate. Stood just outside, looking up at me. Be careful at 73, he said. We already passed it, I snapped. He tilted his head. You did. Others won't. He walked toward the shadowed tables, gait smoothing with each step, body settling into something more human, more natural. Checked the mirror a moment later. He was gone. No shadow, no retreating figure, nothing but empty concrete and dark trees. I drove the last 100 miles with every radio off, windows cracked, engine thrum, and my own breath filling the cab. Pulled into the distribution center with hands leaving damp prints on the wheel. A week later, at a truck stop 3 states over, I heard the story again. Another driver missing near mile 73. Rig found idling, door open, no signs of struggle. The guy telling it shook his head. Damn shame. Stopped for anyone, too. I sip my coffee in silence now. Don't add my own story. Don't say it's a ghost or some woman in white. It's patient. Moves when we move, speaks when we speak, learns the shape of our names in our own voices. And sometimes, dead tired, rode a dark ribbon, mile markers just numbers again. I hear it. Behind my right ear, soft and intimate. My wife's voice from that old voicemail. You okay out there, Riley? I don't answer. Can't. Grip the wheel 10 and 2, eyes sharp on the shoulder. I don't stop. The stretch of Route 6 stays quiet, almost empty, but I know. Mile 73 waits, always patient. Watching, learning, copying, mimicking, shaping itself into what it needs to be. Every shadow along the shoulder makes me flinch. Every pale flicker of movement in the distance, my chest tightens. I know how it thinks, how it waits. It's not angry. It's curious, cold, relentless. Sometimes I replay that night, mile by mile. How he moved, not walked, arranged himself, tested me. The metallic taste in my mouth when he spoke my voice, then hers. The way the cab smelled after him, like pennies left wet, like something that shouldn't exist close enough to touch. I check the mirrors obsessively now. Every flicker, every shift of light, I track. I don't pick up strangers anymore. Don't stop for anyone. Not on 6, not anywhere near 73. Other truckers still whisper over coffee and eggs. Bad mile, they say, and I just nod. Don't add my voice. Don't tell them what really rides that stretch. Because it's patient. Moves when we move. Learns when we learn. And it waits. Oh, it waits. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I feel it in the cab. A weight just behind my right shoulder. Could be exhaustion. Could be imagination. Could be that thing. The one that rides with the living, tracing our breaths, counting our blinks, practicing how to be human. I hear it every so often, that voice. Not always hers, sometimes my own. Sometimes someone else I trust, someone I miss. It's never cruel, never loud, but it presses in. Reminds me that the road isn't just asphalt and signs. It's a corridor for patience, for watching, for learning. And mile 73? That green sign might just be a number. But I know better. I always will. No cops, no sirens, no flashing lights. Just the quiet presence in the passenger seat, waiting for a chance to practice being human. And if I stop? If I ever stop? Well, some stories never end quietly. I grip the wheel tighter, eyes on the white lines, shoulder like a hawk. And I don't stop. Name's Naomi. People always think I stayed in town out of loyalty. Funny story. Truth's darker. I didn't stay because I loved the place. I stayed because leaving meant facing the fact that my hometown had twisted into something I didn't know anymore. And whatever used to lurk at the edge of the cornfields, it wasn't just a man anymore. I ran dispatch for 12 years in a county where nothing big ever went down. Fights, busted up bar stools, the occasional drunk behind the wheel. Then came the prowler calls. Always the same. Always the same stretch of backyards and corn rows. A man standing just past the porch light. First call, I remember thinking, no big deal. Late September. Harvest just starting. Nights falling earlier than your patience. Woman on Old Mill Road calls, voice trembling, whispers, "He's out there, standing right where the grass meets the corn. 15 minutes. Doesn't move." I pull up her address, send a unit, run the usual. Stay inside, lock the doors. Any weapons? "No," she says. "Dark coat, long frame, head tilted, like he's listening." Deputy rolls up, prowler gone. No prints in the frost-hardened dirt. Just a spooked trespasser, right? That's what we told ourselves. Then it happened again. Different house, same road. Same tall, thin guy, hands at his sides. A week later, another. Always just after sunset. Hat or no hat, didn't matter. Callers never saw him leave. They'd check a lock, grab the phone, and blink. And poof, gone. At first, we laughed about it. Night sergeant would joke when an Old Mill address lit up. "Your boyfriend's back, Naomi." I'd roll my eyes, log the call. Deputies got casual too. Weirdos exist everywhere, right? At least this one just stood there. Then someone swore the man was her husband. That call I never forgot. January. Cold that cuts through everything. Corn already chopped down to stubble. Mrs. Caro, mid-50s, habitual caller for raccoons, kids joyriding too fast, came on breathless. "Naomi, it's him." She knew my voice. Everyone in town knows your voice. "He's back." "Back? Who?" I asked, pulling her location. "Tom," she said. "Standing by the fence, but he's sitting next to me on the couch." Goosebumps. My scalp prickled. I heard a man in the background, confused. "Who are you talking to?" I slid into protocol. "Slow down. You're saying your husband's inside, but you see someone who looks like him outside?" "Yes," she gasped. "Same jacket, same hat, just wrong." "Wrong how?" Phone rustled, fabric brushing, then the porch. She whispered, "Arms too long. Hang past the coat sleeves." Smiling, but Tom doesn't smile like that. Not with teeth like that. Husband voice again, closer. "Give me the phone. Linda, you're scaring yourself." New voice, male, annoyed. "This is Tom Caro. My wife's worked up over nothing. No one's out there." And then my screen flickered. Another line. Patrol pocket dial, cruiser idling near Old Mill. Dash cam auto pop for supervisors. Shouldn't have access, but glitch or grace, it flashed. Cruiser headlights cut down gravel lane. At the edge, a figure. Tall, thin, perfectly still. Blink and feed vanished. Tom still talking. "She thinks it's that field man everyone talks about at church," he said, nervous laugh. "Just a shadow." Through his voice, faint, crackling, another voice. "Naomi." My own. Same calm, practiced shift tone. The one I use to answer calls. Throat dry. "Tom, can you stay inside tonight?" I forced the words. "I've got a car nearby. Patrol will swing past." Grumble on the line. Call ended. I stared at my monitor reflection longer than I should. Heart pounding. Deputy reports, same as always. Footprints in frost. Smeared. No one in sight. Tired, not scared. I didn't tell him I'd heard my own voice coming from the field. How? Didn't know.
Years before I had a headset, our town had a monster. Vernon Pike. Used to lurk at field edges, watching women hang laundry, kids play, men drag home tired. Broke into houses, cut phone lines, left damage that echoes. Caught him when I was 16, dead in prison at 24. A decade, shadows in fields were just that. Shadows. Then the Edgeman came back. Whispers said Vernon's ghost, that evil seeps into soil. Ghosts? Nah. Men like him. Towns keep their scars.
But the prowler calls kept coming. Details changed. Neck too long, head twisted unnaturally. Teen swore it was his own reflection, hoodie, hair, the smile a heartbeat late. We dug old files. Sheriff let me. Curiosity or fatigue. Early Vernon reports. Victims described him before he spoke, trying on being human. One handwritten note. Like pictures, trying to match them, but too many elbows. Sitting in the records room, fluorescent hum above, I felt the ground tilt under me. What if Vernon wasn't first? What if something older watched, learned, stepped into the gap? Something that wanted to haunt forever. Wouldn't it choose the man everyone already blamed? The last call that broke me came late August. Corn towering again, air heavy and electric. My own neighbor, Mrs. Harlow, still the type to hand out cookies at Christmas, was on the line. "Naomi," she said before I could even greet. "He's out there." Automatic. "Stay inside. Lock your doors." "No," she snapped. "Not in the field. He's in my backyard. Closer than ever. I can see his eyes." Heart in my throat. Pulled her address, fingers shaking. What do they look like?" I asked, knowing the answer would rip at my chest. Rustle. Phone moving. Her voice tight, small. "They look like yours," she whispered, "but too far apart." Then I heard it. From somewhere on her lawn, near the back steps, a man spoke. Same cadence, same words I'd drilled into myself for years. "Stay inside. Lock your doors." I did what the book said, transferred the call, sent units, ticked off every checklist. But dawn came, bruised pink over the horizon, and the corn at the edge of town shifted under the light, like something tall, patient, was gliding beneath the tassels, keeping pace with me. I quit a month later. Officially? Burnout. 12 years of screaming voices, emergencies, frozen nights. True, but it wasn't the full story. I moved a town over. Apartment view of brick and fire escapes, not cornfields. Dispatch called twice, then gave up. Mom says the prowler calls slowed. People either stopped seeing him or stopped reporting. Certain nights, when the wind lines up right, I swear I smell cut corn through the city grime. Sometimes my phone buzzes with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answer. 911, what's your emergency? My own voice, calm, rehearsed. I hang up every time. No files, no dash cams, nothing left to check. I tell myself it's over. But the thing at the edge of the fields doesn't need cameras or radios. It learned our faces, our moves, the cadence of our dispatcher voices calming terrified strangers. Somewhere out there, in another town with corn instead of bricks, someone's calling in about a man at the edge of their property, and the voice that answers might sound exactly like mine. A beat too late, already practicing their name. My name's Oliver, and I used to brag I wasn't scared of the woods. That was a lie. Grew up hiking weekends, worked a summer as a ranger's aide, learned all the rules, leave no trace, map and compass in hand, check in with someone. The forest made sense then. Follow the rules and it mostly left you alone. I believed that right up to the day the Ridgeview Loop twisted back on itself, and I ran into my own face, grinning in a way that wasn't mine. The Ridgeview Loop is 6 miles of postcard-perfect park, popular, marked trails, ranger station with stickers and cheap coffee at the trailhead. I'd done it half a dozen times. A show-off hike, the kind you drag friends to when you want to prove you know a spot. That day it was just me and Rebecca, my closest thing to family in a city that never felt like home. She'd just lost a client in a way that shook her career. I'd been waking up with migraines sharp enough to taste metal. So we did what desperate people do. We ran to the trees. Plan was simple. Drive up Saturday morning, hike the loop, hit the diner for late lunch, back in the city before dark. The ranger at check-in was new. Young, clean, ponytail-free head. Ran the spiel. Stay on the trail, black bears active, no food in cars. Then he hesitated, eyes flicking between us. Some hikers talk about weird stuff on the loop, he said. Seeing themselves, stuff like that. Probably social media nonsense. But if you feel turned around, don't trust your eyes. The trail always comes back eventually. I joked about doppelgangers. Rebecca rolled her eyes. Can't even escape clones out here. We laughed. The ranger didn't. First few miles were textbook perfect. Cool air, dappled light, crunch of dirt under boots. Trees tall enough to humble but not swallow. Old growth that whispers instead of looming. Easy rhythm. She talked law school. I complained about plumbing. Past other hikers, nods and haze. About 2 miles in, the trail curves along a ridge, dips into a hollow, swings back toward the station. That's when the first gut twist hit. Felt like we'd passed the same mossy boulder twice. I looked back. Only trees. Only distant hikers. Déjà vu, I muttered. Rebecca glanced at me. You okay? Yeah, just tired. Then we saw them. Still in the joking phase, around a switchback, maybe 100 yards ahead. A pair. Man and woman, jackets the same shade of blue as ours. Look, our twins beat us to it, I nudged Rebecca. She snorted. Great. Knockoff brand gets knockoffs. From that distance, coincidence made sense. Lots of gear sold at chain stores. Lots of couples end up matching. We lost sight of them. Then, half an hour later, after a climb leaving us gasping, there they were again. Clearing, fallen log. Everyone rests there. Carved initials, Valley View. I'd a picture from 3 summers back. Heart dropped. Same pair, same jackets, same build. Woman sat on the log, back to us, head tilted like Rebecca does when stretching. Man a few feet off, hands on hips like I do, catching my breath. Did they stop too? I whispered, They stopped? Rebecca murmured, Weird. We slowed. Footsteps soft. Expected laughter at mirror image coincidence. Nothing. They froze in place. No weight shift. No head tilt. Not even breathing. Hey! I called, partly breaking tension, partly warding off whatever nightmare this was. Nice spot, huh? They moved. But wrong. Man's head twisted first, slow, puppet-like. Woman's shoulders jerked after a heartbeat. Faces came into view. My brain hit pause. Myself and Rebecca, live mirrors in the woods. Same jawline, nose, scar above eyebrow from bike fall at 9. Then wrongness seeped in. Eyes slightly too big, mouth stretched too wide. Cheeks shifting like something beneath the skin deciding where bones belonged. "Ol," my voice said, clear from the man. Wrong pitch, same rhythm. Half-second lag. Bad dub. Beside him, woman spoke Rebecca's name in her exact, exhausted voicemail tone. I froze. The thing I thought I'd never do. Freeze. We should go, Rebecca whispered, calm, quiet, never looking at them. Hand on my wrist, pressing hard enough to leave crescent moons in skin. We walked. Not run. Running invites chase. Too fast to be casual, too slow to be honest. Eyes on trail markers, dirt, anything but those frozen doubles. I felt their gaze like warm breath on the back of my neck. Cool air, but no sound of them following. Forest grew silent. No birds, no chatter, just boots, heartbeat drum. At a curve, I risked a glance back. Clearing empty, fallen log alone under trees. We didn't speak until we were in the car, door locked, metal and glass manufacturing safety. You saw them? I said, staring out the windshield. They were us, Rebecca said, exhaling a breath she'd held for an hour. Trying to be us. Ranger at station watched as we signed out, eyes flicking between our faces like counting features. Good hike? Did you ever see anyone that looks like someone you know on that loop? I blurted, jaw tightened. A lot of folks report doubles, he said. Exhaustion, shadows, tricks of light. Trail always leads back here if you stick to it. Rebecca opened her mouth, closed it. We signed out. Left. I don't know what we met. Something old enough to read patterns, curious enough to stand where we stood, sit how we sit, try our voices on like borrowed clothes. Official story we tell. Tired eyes, light playing tricks. Sometimes you see yourself in others. But some nights, apartment dark, TV off, I watch my own reflection too closely. Smile a fraction late, eyes a hair too far apart, throat tightens. Last thing I remember from that loop, just before it spat us back at the station, the feeling someone was walking it in reverse, starting where we ended, coming toward us from the other side. I made it out. Rebecca too, I think. I check often, more than she knows. Her laugh, her head tilt, blink timing, all matching the woman I knew before that hike. What keeps me awake isn't the almost faces in the clearing. It's the quiet, growing certainty. Whatever learned us that day didn't stay in the woods. Paths don't just circle. Some lead forward, into places we think are safe. Somewhere, something is still walking that loop, getting better at being whoever it meets.